Okay, we're recording. No more profanity. Okay, so last time we were talking about the evolution of programming languages, right? So we started off with this Microsoft stole Java, told that whole story, got into C Sharp and how it's platform independent. Did we actually talk through this? We just kind of mentioned C Sharp, but we kind of at the point of what C Sharp is. Did we talk about missile code?
Briefly.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the difference between Java and C Sharp? What's the punchline? How is C Sharp's platform independence different than Java's platform independence? Okay, so C Sharp's platform independent as long as you're running Windows. You're running any platform as long as it's Windows. Okay, so let me bounce back to an older slide. So, this is where we are in terms of programming languages today. So we have our grandparent C, which was a procedural language. From there, we branched off into two object-oriented languages, C++ and Objective-C, because Microsoft and Apple don't agree. From C++, we upgraded to Java, which took a lot of the error proneness, I think that's a word, out of C++. So one of the issues with C++, which used to be the de facto teaching language, I guess, especially for beginning programmers, when you write your code, you introduce a zillion errors into your code. Well, the problem with C++ is sometimes your errors would result in your computer crashing and you having to reboot your machine. So that takes it a step further. Beyond your program not working, now you actually have to restart your computer because your program didn't work. Because you corrupted memory or something. Java did away with that because it no longer allowed the computer to make horrifically stupid decisions. Every decision you get to make in Java at least needs to make sense. So that was the upgrade of Java over C++. C Sharp was the birth child of Microsoft trying to steal Java, failing, creating their own language, but now it's become a pretty popular language. So our big three now are Java, C Sharp, and Objective-C 2.0. Now, where do these guys fit in the world? Well, let's look at that. Who uses C Sharp? C Sharp is going to be used for Windows, business, and game development. And the game development part of that is a newer tradition. Before that, C++ was still used for games for performance reasons. So if you're doing anything Windows-based, where the application you're creating is going to be for Windows only, you would probably be using C Sharp. Now, C Sharp is actually part of a suite of languages that comes with a product called Visual Studio, which I think I've mentioned before, right? And here, Visual Studio is an IDE, integrated development environment, that allows you, it's kind of a super fancy text editor for writing software. It does some things that are convenient for programmers. So Visual Studio actually hosts several languages. It hosts C++, it hosts C Sharp, it hosts, actually technically this is something called Visual C++, not just C++. Then it hosts C Sharp, it hosts Visual Basic. It's actually a new language it hosts, but don't worry about that. And finally, ASP.NET is the last thing, which kind of segues into the last technology you might see people using C Sharp. So C Sharp is also, well, not C Sharp, but ASP is a web language. So I'm not going to go too far into this. I'll just kind of give you the 30-second overview. But there exists a classification of web languages for writing web pages that are server-side languages. That is, if you've ever gone onto your web browser and typed in something.php or something.aspx, or seen a link that had that on there. What that's doing is it's actually sending a request to a web server. The web server is doing some processing up there before it spits back to you HTML, which is what your web browser understands. So ASP.NET is a server-side programming language, and you accomplish ASP.NET using any of the Visual Studio languages. So you can write web code using Visual C++, C#, VB, any of those languages. Even interchangeable, which is kind of a neat side effect of the missile code thing. So we looked at the difference between Java and C# last time. Oh, that was this slide, right? Yeah, that was this slide. They look identical all the way down until we get to this thing where Java runs on multiple platforms and C# only runs on Windows. Well, you can say any of the Visual Studio languages here can get compiled to missile code. They'll run through the .NET component architecture for IIS. Let's go sideways. This is Internet Information Server. That's Microsoft's web server. So when it runs through that, then it'll run inside of any web browser, but you can use any of those source languages to write your web code. So that's actually a convenient thing. Typically, when you're a web programmer versus a business application programmer, or probably more traditionally, if you go into industry now as a computer programmer, you'll end up kind of being a jack of all trades and just writing whatever the business needs. Typically, you would be writing using one language to do your desktop development, whether it's C# if you're doing Windows only, or maybe Java or Objective-C. We'll talk about those in a second. And then you'd probably be using like a PHP language, which is kind of ASP.NET's competitor, let's say, for doing web-based stuff. So the nice thing, if you are at a Microsoft shop, if you will, if you're writing desktop applications for Windows and you're writing web applications that are meant to run on Microsoft's Internet Information Server, is every day you go to work, you're going to be using probably the same language. You know, your problem solving might change a little bit if you're responding to button clicks and stuff in a web browser versus button clicks and stuff in a traditional graphic user interface, but you're still using the same programming language all the time. So one nice thing about Microsoft's Visual Studio, their development suite, is that you use the same suite of languages, and most people just pick one of those. Most people today are using C# as let's just call that's Microsoft's top tier language, is C#. It's their most modern. Visual Basic is mostly a clown language. Any of you ever programmed in Visual Basic before? Clown language, right? Visual Basic was designed for non-programmers. This was kind of in the early days of people writing software at home. We had the time period where it's like, oh, it's cool if you have a computer at home. And then we had this time period where they thought, you know what? People are all geeks and they want to write software at home. That ended up not working out. Only some people are geeky and want to write software at home. Most people want to go out and buy or steal software and run it at home, right? That's what they want to do. Well, Visual Basic was kind of created not just for writing stuff at home, but even for small businesses who had internal people that were sort of kind of computer savvy to sort of kind of write simple software packages. But it dumbs things down so much that it becomes almost not a real programming language. It lets you get away with so much stuff, like it almost doesn't matter what you write. It's kind of strongly typed and loosely typed at the same time. It's object-oriented and procedural at the same time. It's a TV dinner plus it's Kraft macaroni and cheese at the same time. I know that wasn't one of our slides, but it's also true. So Visual Basic is kind of a leftover language, if you will. It's not that it's bad. It's just designed to be so user-friendly that if you actually know how to program, it disgusts you. If that sort of kind of makes sense, maybe. But in any case, that's maybe the benefit of Microsoft's suite of applications, is you learn, if you become an expert in that, as long as you're in a Microsoft shop, you know the entire breadth of technology for delivering stuff for web or PC, as well as Windows Phone. So if you want to write mobile applications for Windows 8 phones, which obviously, any of you using a Windows 8 phone, Microsoft phone? They're actually quite good. That's probably the first mobile software that Microsoft has pretty much gotten right. A little bit too late, You're fighting a pretty uphill battle when you have the two behemoths at the top. You have Apple and Google, taking up 109% of the smartphone space. But in terms of product quality, the Microsoft phone and the Microsoft operating system is actually pretty strong. So if you were to write software for mobile applications for a Windows phone, you would be using C#. So again, the same language for all those things, cross-platform, as long as you're running on Microsoft technology. It's the punchline. Okay, so C# would be using Visual Studio for desktop applications, web apps on IIS, that's Internet Information Server, and mobile apps for mobile Windows 8. And there is still some life here, possibly, with those Surface tablets, which haven't necessarily taken off. The hardware doesn't kind of match up to what they're trying to accomplish. Any of you have a Microsoft Surface tablet or have used one? Do you have one? Yeah. Okay, what do you think?
I like it a lot. Schoolwork, but you couldn't play games that much or anything.
Okay. I mean, so here's the benefit of the tablet. So Microsoft came out with this tablet. Obviously, it's a competition for like iPads and Android tablets, right? But it takes a very different approach. iPads and Android tablets, well, let's really just talk iPads, because Android tablets modeled them off of that, so I don't have to talk about them both. So iPads really tried to take what is that space between the desktop and the smartphone, where you want a bigger screen, but you don't need a mouse. Make sense? So everything about the iPad and also Android tablets is about applications that are touch-friendly only. Now, Microsoft is of the opinion, and maybe not wrongly so, that some applications, although I've found that most translate well to touch interfaces, but some applications require a level of precision that you really can't get with your finger. You really need the fine thing with a mouse, right? You need the little point, that guy. You need to be able to click on a pixel type thing. All right, so that's the type thing there. Well, so what's Apple's answer to that? Well, buy an iPad and a Mac. So for that those one or two applications that you really need, maybe it's an accounting software or something like that you really need to have that precision, buy our $2,000 iMac, run your software. Actually, realistically, it's probably Windows software. So you're going to go and buy your budget pleaser HP at Best Buy, spend $500, and that's going to be where you do your accounting. Everything else is on your iPad or your Android tablet. Well, Microsoft was of the opinion a lot of people fit into that category of there's one application or two applications that they need their desktop for. And if it wasn't for those one or two applications, the tablet size machine is ideal for them. So the Surface tablet tries to be, basically it is a desktop computer, but it's in a tablet format, and you can plug a mouse and a keyboard into it, so it can become a desktop if you need it to become a desktop. But Windows 8 is designed in such a way that it's touch-friendly. That's why it has all those panels and stuff like that people hated at first. How many of you are using Windows 8? How many of you have learned to like it? How many of you hated it to begin with? Because it's different, right? Once you use it for about 3 or 4 days and actually give it a chance, you actually realize it's not that different. But just because you're so used to, we go to start menu to make things happen, because you're so used to that, it's ingrained in your soul that that's how Windows should work. And they're like, oh my gosh, they changed the game on me. So we end up hating it, but it's really not bad software. It's fine. In fact, in computer science, I think that Microsoft in many ways gets a very bad name for themselves, where computers would not be where they are today without Microsoft. And they're all crooks. So, it's not just Microsoft. They're all the companies. They're all corrupt and all that crap. So don't throw Microsoft out there as being the bad guy. Any of them will do anything for a check. So in any case, with the Surface tablet, Microsoft decided, let's try to be both. Let's try to be a low-end desktop for those one or two applications, and let's try to be a high-end tablet at the same time. Two problems with that. the first problem is the correct hardware for the Surface tablet is the ARM processor version of it that's running Windows 8 RT. Okay, that's the less expensive, but not the Surface Pro. It's a normal Surface tablet, much less expensive, much more battery friendly. Also, won't run your desktop applications because they were written for the full-fledged Intel processor. So it's the correct mobile tool, but it won't solve the problem of your desktop stuff. So what does that make you do? It makes you go and buy the Pro version, Windows 8 Surface Tablet Pro, which start at like $699 or something. I think they dropped the price maybe to $499 now. But regardless, they're more expensive. The problem with them is because of the size of the devices, they can only fit so much hardware in there. So they end up being very, very low-end PCs with horrible battery life compared to the 24-hour battery life you have in some of these other tablets. So in order to get the tool that really bridges the gap between desktop and tablet, you have to get the Pro version, which is too expensive and doesn't really have the battery life you want. The idea is good. The execution at this point is probably weak. But we'll see. I mean, over the next couple of years, Microsoft might figure that out, or they might identify the 5 or 10 applications that people are really finding that they need the mouse for, and they might port those over for the ARM processor. Let's bring those into the mobile world, but make it mouse friendly. Where Apple and Android have really, definitely Apple has bailed on the mouse for their mobile stuff, right? Everything's touch. Android's a little bit, Google's playing an interesting game with Android. And let me actually talk about that in terms of Java. So if I go off topic and I don't come back to that, remind me, because it's a very interesting thing, actually. So this is the C# story, okay? If you're doing Microsoft crap, you're using C#. All right? And let's just go to the antithesis of that. Objective-C, Apple crap. Okay, that's Mac This is Mac OS software, iPhone software, iPod Touch, iPad. So Objective-C is the C# of Apple. Make sense? So if you're writing if you are writing software for Apple, you're using Objective-C. Period. There really isn't another option. You can invent new options on the Windows side. Like if you don't want to use C#, there's 5 or 6 other languages you could potentially use. You're just wasting your time because it's not an industry standard. C# is. If you go, think about when you come out of school with your computer science degree and you're looking at getting a job, you're probably going to find maybe 50% of the jobs are C#, Microsoft development. Then you'll probably find another 20% are Java. And then probably the last 30 will be, interestingly enough, Objective-C. The iPhone and iPad development has a really big foothold in the industry when you consider how long it's been out compared to Microsoft desktop software. You'll actually find a very small percentage of places looking for Android developers. They're mostly looking for Objective-C developers who then can easily just go and learn Android. Because Objective-C is rarer. Because Apple is Objective-C is far more common today than it was, say, 8 years ago before iPhone. But, it's still, compared to Java programmers, for every one Objective-C programmer, you probably have 50 Java programmers. And that might be actually an understatement. It might be more like 100 Java programmers. And that's Objective-C becoming popular. Okay, so, anyways, Objective-C is Mac crap. Make sense? So remember, we're talking about our big 3 languages. C# is Windows crap. Objective-C is Mac crap. Well, whose crap is Java for? Java is actually an interesting dealio. Java would likely be dead today if it wasn't for one company and one technology. Because we kind of told the story of Java last class, where it was a really great idea, but it was 90% executed. And then Microsoft tried to steal it and then just rewrote it and finished that execution by looking towards performance. That was always Java's weakness, is performance. For mainstream like gaming and stuff. Their performance is fine for business applications. So two things really saved Java. The first thing was something, how do you spell it? Applets, I think that's it. First thing is something called a Java applet. That just doesn't look right. Is it that? No, it's two P's. Yeah, it just looks funny. So the first thing is a Java applet. Anybody know what a Java applet is? I'm sure you've all used one before. I think that orange juice may have sat out too long. It had a film. I drank it too quick. I wasn't able to react. You know. What was I talking about? Oh, Java applets. Java applets. How many of you ever played any of those online like poker games and things like that? Yahoo games? Some of them are Flash-based today, but a lot of them are still applet-based. An applet is a Java program that runs inside of a web browser. Okay? That's what an applet is. So this guy is Java program that runs in web browser. Did I spell that right? Yeah, that looks right. Okay, so now again, in Microsoft style, they're like, hey, we like that. So Microsoft tried to come out with a couple of other technologies. They came out with one called COM. That failed. And the one that you've probably heard of, something called ActiveX. How many of you have heard of ActiveX or have been bugged by Internet Explorer when you come to a screen and it has a little pop-up bar saying, this page is wanting to run this application. Hit yes to blah, 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 whatever. Okay, right? So, weaknesses with ActiveX. First weakness is Microsoft. And actually, it's not even their fault. Microsoft is a huge, huge, huge target. That kind of comes back to, how many of you ever had an Apple fanboy buddy who says, oh, Macs, they don't have viruses? You all know one of those guys? Are any of you one of those guys? Don't be ashamed. You can admit it. And none of you? It's like, oh, Macs, no virus. That's why I have a Mac. It doesn't get viruses. I could stand up here and I could probably, well, I sit because I'm heavy. But I could probably make an argument that the Mac operating system is slightly more secure than the Microsoft operating system. Not because of anything Apple did. Apple stole their operating system from a very good source, OpenBSD, which is a time-tested Unix-based operating system, which is why it's pretty secure. Now, having said that, we're not talking about leaps and bounds differently. I'll maybe give Apple a 10% bump in security over Windows NT. Windows NT, which is the kernel, the actual operating system under all of our Windows machines, Windows 8, Windows 7, Windows Vista, they're all NT-based operating systems, is a very, very strong and secure operating system. So now why does a zillion viruses exist for Windows and very few, if any, exist for Mac?
Is it because there's a lot more Windows users, so the hackers they want to hack?
That's exactly why. Okay, if you're a hacker, you're a virus writer. I mean, you're obviously a jerk. Okay, you want to affect if you're going to do this, you're going to spend the time on this. You want to affect the biggest number of people, right? So are you going to affect the millions and millions and millions of Windows users or the 6 Mac users? Okay, and this is coming from a Mac user. All my machines are Macs because I can dual boot Windows on it. I only have to carry one machine around with me. But the point is that it's not that Microsoft and Windows suck. It's that they're a huge, huge target, and that's why they're getting the most viruses. I think you'll probably see over the next couple of years, you're already starting to hear the squeaks about this now, but there's starting to be viruses for iPhone and also Android. Well, you're not going to hear about a whole lot of viruses for Windows Mobile 8 Because there's only 3 people using that. So a lot of times these stories get misconstrued. It's not that Windows sucks. In fact, for those of you who are Windows users, Microsoft is solving an extremely hard problem. It's shocking how well Windows works. When you consider the number of different configurations of hardware it's designed to run on. I mean, no wonder Macs just work pretty well because they control the hardware and the software. They come out with the OS X Mavericks and it runs on like 9 different computers. All of which Apple controls. So, just kind of the punchline. But anyways, Microsoft came out with a technology called ActiveX, which was a program running inside of a web browser. Cool. 2 problems. Well, sure, 2 problems. First one is it only runs in Internet Explorer. So if you've ever run into an application that says, or a website that says you must be running Internet Explorer in order to view this website or something like that, that's a weakness of ActiveX. Because how many of you are Internet Explorer users? Not that have you use Internet Explorer, but that's your go-to browser. Okay, chances are, so let's see, we'll try to, I'm going to try to guess, because we're going to go in order of most users. Chrome. Who uses Chrome? Haha, okay, I think I guessed right. Number 2, Firefox. And then we're going to have a much smaller group of Safari, because those are only going to be the Mac users. Actually, interesting. How many of you are Mac users? Raise your hand. Keep your hand up if Safari is not your default browser. Are you both on Chrome?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chrome or Firefox.
Okay. Anything but Safari?
Yeah.
Got it. Why Chrome? Why did you choose Chrome over Safari? And I'll tell you an interesting punchline. Mac user, back corner. Why Chrome over Safari?
It's smoother, it works better, it doesn't have 100 errors like I usually get with Safari.
Did you know they're built on the exact same technology?
No.
Yeah, Apple came out with something called WebKit. And Safari is built on top of WebKit. And Chrome decided, hey, this is a good idea. So they built their browser on top of WebKit. The big difference between Chrome and Safari is Safari's got a lot of bloat. So does Internet Explorer. They try to build all this crap into it, so it's a very heavyweight application. Chrome weighs, if we were putting this in terms of like human weight, Safari probably weighs like 70 or 80 pounds. Internet Explorer weighs about 450 pounds. Chrome probably weighs like 3 pounds. Okay, so it's meant to be very, very quick because it doesn't have a bunch of built-in plugins and crap like that in it. So it's built on the same technology as Safari, but it's very streamlined, so less things can go wrong. But it's kind of an interesting punchline. Oh, they'll be passed in a second. All right, so in any case, that's kind of your punchline with Chrome. But I have found that Safari works, for me, more often for sites than Chrome. I mean, they're relatively equivalent for most sites, but I run into sites more often that don't function correctly in Chrome than do for Safari. That's just been my personal experience. It could just be the sites I go to. Maybe the biggest example would be Angel. Angel doesn't function that well under Chrome. I get weird crap. But then again, I still get some weird crap with Angel and Safari too, but maybe I'm just used to it. But in any case, ActiveX has 2 big flaws. One is it only runs in Internet Explorer. The other flaw is being a Microsoft technology, it was also a major target. So there's lots of security holes in it. The security holes aren't necessarily because of ActiveX, but they're because of the security holes innately built into Internet Explorer because it was a big target. To this day, Internet Explorer is the biggest web browser base. Even though amongst technologists, we just showed that, how many of you use Internet Explorer as your main browser? Nobody that'll admit to it? Okay. Very few of us in here. But if we went to a mall and we took a poll, you'd probably find 70, 75% people use Internet Explorer as their main browser. Why? Because, well, I installed Windows and I have a little blue E, and that's what the guy at Geek Squad said to click on for the intranet. So, Don't you wish all your classes were this entertaining? How many of you have Dr. Manouge this semester? I told you he was good, isn't he? He's a funny Brit, huh? Ask him about queuing up. So, anyways, ActiveX tried to do what Java Applets did, didn't do it well. But again, if you are in a Microsoft shop and everything you're creating is Microsoft based, chances are if you're doing web applications, and not a website that is dynamic, but an actual application that runs inside of a web browser, you would be writing it in ActiveX because you're at a Microsoft shop. Okay? But Java really owns this space with applications that run out of web browsers. Okay? Platform independence would be another big thing. True platform independence. So throw the performance issue out the window and say 90% of the time performance doesn't matter. Because, it only matters in gaming. And most of us who are serious gamers are not going to be launching a game out of a web browser. Right? We're going to be turning on our PlayStation or our Xbox or our PC, our gaming rig PC that we built that has all this liquid cooled stuff and things like that, all of which you don't need because your machine sits 99% idle. But it looks cool. How many of you built a gaming rig computer? How many of you have one of those? You had one? Then you eBayed it and bought yourself an apartment? Okay, so in any case, Java, applets are a big deal. Platform independence is a big deal. Third thing is Google. And a synonym for Google is anti-Microsoft. Although every single time they question any of them, oh no, we love Windows. We love Microsoft. If you're a Google employee, you get to choose what kind of desktop computer you get. What are your options? Mac or? No, there isn't. Linux. Mac or a Linux box. Now, I think they'll let you install Windows on your Mac. But they do not offer you a Dell or something like that. Evidence would indicate that Google is not necessarily a fan of Microsoft. I mean, they're direct competitors. So, don't demonize Google for that decision. But part of the situation is when Google started becoming popular, Microsoft's been around a lot longer than Google, right? As Google started becoming a big boy, they had to make decisions to set themselves apart from their competition. And one of those decisions they made is we're going to be a Java shop. Now, they also, Google internally uses Java heavily. So all Android development is Java. All of it. Okay? So once you know Java, you're 93.25% the way there to writing Android software. You just need to learn the Android ecosystem, if you will. And we usually teach a class. Sometime during your 4 years, we'll have an Android class here. I teach a special topics course that we cover Android, and they don't repeat. I think they have to go 3 years without repeating because you can repeat that class 3 times. So I don't remember the last time I taught Android, maybe 2 years ago. So we're probably close to having another one. And then we also have an iPhone one and the blah, 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 that crap. And I'll be your entertainer for all those classes. What was I talking about? Oh, Google, anti-Microsoft, that's right. So, they had to make design decisions. So basically Java became the platform of choice for Google. Internally for heavyweight applications, they use Java. For scripting-based applications, they were a big fan of Python. It's a scripting language. So that would be a general purpose, interpreted, high-level, loosely typed object-oriented-ish. Did I skip anything? Programming language. That's what Python is. It's a scripting language. They used it a lot for web-based stuff, as well as internal like hooks, things that happen within Google searches and things like that. So Google really propped up Java. But there's a whole industry around Java applets that people, typically students, maybe students is a bad one, maybe the younger generation isn't aware of at this point. How many of you buy and sell stocks? Not many of us, right? A couple of us might have one or two or something like that, or whatever it is. But in this age group, we're not necessarily looking at retirement. We're looking at paying rent, right? Okay. So in any case, would you agree that buying and selling stocks, Wall Street type crap, that's kind of where the money is, right? That's the center point of the wealth in the United States. I'm not saying go and do that because you could also lose your shirt. But the point is that it's a very important demographic of our society, even though it's a small group, relatively small group. If you go to any of those online trading platforms, whether it's Thinkorswim or E-Trade or Scottrade or any of those, they'll all have their professional trading platform for day traders, people that are active. Your job is you wake up in the morning, 45 minutes before the stock market opens, catch up on the news that's going so that you're ready to start trading the second the market opens. You maybe don't stop trading until the market closes. That's your job. Okay? Now, those places all have a professional platform that either you get for free if you have a certain amount of money in your account, or you pay like $99 a month or something like that for. And they're all Applet based. They're full-fledged trading platforms that will run across multiple monitors. These guys, you'll sit there with like 5 monitors around them. They're looking at stock indices over here, and their charting is on this one, all this stuff. And this is a Java applet that launched out of a web browser that's providing that. So that would be another big reason that Java hasn't gone away, is because it directly supports millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars per second in the world economy. And I'm probably even underestimating. It's probably billions of dollars per second actually moving across. But anyways, that's a niche that Java has fulfilled because of that applet technology. Because those companies only had to write those platforms once and make them really, really good, and they'll run in any browser on any platform. Make sense? So it's kind of a cool thing with Java. All right, questions about that? All right, so this is where our big three live in today's society. Another interesting thing with Java, today Java is owned by a company called Oracle. It used to be Sun Microsystems. Oracle, big fish, ate pretty big fish. So they bought Sun Microsystems. Oracle is run by a dude named Larry Ellison. He was one of Steve Jobs' former, dead Apple guy, right? He was one of his best friends. So he's got a lot of stories about what some of the things him and Steve Jobs talked about. But in any case, Oracle likes to brag about whenever anybody writes anything for Android, they're using Oracle's tools. So even though Java is the language that you write Android software using, in order to write an Android program, you have to use Eclipse running all of Oracle's Java tools. You basically can't write an app. You can't write Android software without Oracle. They depend on each other, if you will. Well, Android depends on Oracle. Apple depends on Apple. How do you write Apple software for iPhone? You use Xcode, which Apple makes. You use Objective-C, which Apple is. Apple did not invent Objective-C. They adopted it, and if Apple says they want something in Objective-C, it happens. They're by far the biggest user of Objective-C, and they drive that industry. So let's just say Apple basically makes the language, and they make the hardware that it's running on. So Apple controls everything. That's their proprietary nature. Java is a very open nature company. They don't even build their hardware. Even the Google phone, the Nexus devices, they're made by Asus, also not Google. Okay, so the phone that they say is the actual Google phone is not even made by Google. So Google makes software and does pretty good at searching, and also has done email decently well, and pretty much fails at everything else. It's actually an interesting ecosystem over at Google. Google comes out with about let's call it 100 technologies a year, most of which fail. But their ecosystem is they throw lots and lots of darts. If you work at Google 1 day a week, they pay you to work on whatever you want to work on. Your own projects, that kind of stuff. But Google gets the first right of refusal to buy your company, buy your technology. Not take it, but buy it. Kind of an interesting, so they're a very forward-thinking, open thought process type of company. Kind of a neat setup. Okay, so those are our big three and where they stand in the world. And this is why they fill all those individual niches. Make sense? Java does have a competing technology with ASP.NET and PHP. It's called JSP. Nobody uses it. There's nothing wrong with it. If you're in a Java shop, maybe you'd use it, but it's a very small percentage. All right, so let's talk about variables. So this goes back to one of our older slides. How do human beings solve problems? Well, we have to remember things. Remember, programming languages try to simulate the way people solve problems. So human beings have to remember things to solve problems, and programming languages provide for us a tool called variables for doing this. All right, so what's a variable? A variable is a named container in memory for storing a value. This value must be of a certain type in strongly typed languages. So it's kind of like going out to Target and buying one of those giant Tupperware things that you can throw crap into. Strongly typed languages, you have to use the Sharpie on the outside saying what you're going to put in there. Loosely typed languages, you don't. You can just throw whatever you want in there. Okay, so that's what a variable is generically. It's a named container in memory for storing a value. Okay, so there are two types of variables. Primitive types and object types. Those are our two types of variables. We're going to talk about primitive types first, and then we'll actually introduce object types after we start getting into GameSalad, which is the tool we're going to use in this class. So a primitive type is a type built into the language that is only capable of holding a value. What time is this class over? At noon or 55? 55, okay. So primitive types are types built into the language that are only a type built. Well, whatever. Just fix it. I think if I said types built into the language that are only capable of holding a value. Close enough. All right, so that's what primitive types are. Objects, for right now, we're going to say can hold 0 or more values and potentially do more with 4 exclamation points. That's the important part. Okay? So, primitive types. I'm going to kind of create this slide and then we'll pick up here next time. I'm actually going to show you the Java primitive type. So part of the rationale for this is the language you'll be using next semester is Java. What you'll be using this semester is a tool called GameSalad that has kind of its own subset of these primitive types. But in preparation for what you'll be running into next semester, I kind of show you the Java way of doing things. So we're going to be talking about the Java primitive types next class. Okay? But somebody's got to remind me about instant win airbags too. Okay, I'll see everybody on Friday.